we're talking about Through the Mist. And what I'm doing is that the book Through the Mist is a PDF. We're talking about chapter 4, The Mount of God, by a spirit. His name is Fred. He actually wished to remain anonymous, but he had died in the late 19th century, when he tried to go into the middle of the street and rescue a young street urchin. Uh, he woke up in a grassy plain, dead, and he felt no pain or anything. He thought, well, I survived, but he didn't. He actually ended up in heaven, and this is his book. So before I begin, let's have a prayer. Dear Jesus, our wonderful Father who loves and watches over us completely, please allow us to discern what we need and what we desire. Please allow us to use our conscience and our instinct and our conscience, that divine set of laws, so we can filter out all the stimuli, all the propaganda, all the bad inspirations, all the commercials that tell us what we should have or want to have versus what our own conscience and good personality and good moral foundation tell us what we actually need in this life, because we're not here on this life to acquire. We're here to transform ourselves into wonderful souls under your guidance, in the protections and inspiration of wonderful and guardian angels everywhere. Amen. So let us begin. Now, we'll start chapter 4 of the Mount of God. But just real quick, I would like to have, in case you are interested in Spiritism and you want to read where the headwaters of Spiritism came from. It came from Allan Kardec, who codified the Spirit's book. He wrote a series of 1,019 questions and wrote the answers, and only if they were the same or similar, from multiple mediums into this book, the Spirit's book, all organized by the Spirit of Truth. Okay, let me clear the screen. I will bring up where we were on this chapter. Now, let me go back a bit to the chapter. So what happened in this chapter, because I'm in the middle of the chapter now, is that our wonderful spirit witnessed a woman spirit who didn't want to see like a brother and sister, and she started trying to escape, and she kind of started ascending, but you could tell she couldn't do that, because even the mentor told Fred that no, it's not going to allow to do that. And then she went back down to where she was more comfortable. And of course, that's what Spiritism says. There's no gates between the different levels of heaven, of the lower zone, or the dark abyss, purgatory, hell, whatever you like to call it. There's no eternal punishment now. But what happens is, people, when they try to walk up the path, right, ascend, they just feel like they can't do it, right? It's the light's too bright. It just doesn't feel well. And until they really change their character, it's not possible. So what happens is that he's telling them that, can't she be helped? And so he says, no, God never, he goes, well, can we save them now? And he says, well, no, God never turns aside to avoid the consequences of man's folly. So what they're saying is that, is a lot of religions and different say that you can, on your deathbed, you can say, I repent, and everything's forgiven. And everything's always forgiven, but you still have things you have to pay for the wrongs you committed. This is what he goes on. But on the other hand, even that pang you so much regret is permitted by that same law of love. Although she is at present unconscious of it, the woman has gained one point of information which will give her hope and consolation presently. And that one point is when she saw the people that had died, and she saw the forgiveness in their eyes, but she just couldn't take it because she must have done something terrible to them. The which she could not have learned had she not had that unpleasant experience. What is that, I ask? She knows that there is no gate at which an angel is standing to keep her back from the way of life, and will presently be brought to understand that the only obstacle in her way of happiness lies within herself. When she is able to recognize this, it will become a powerful incentive to improve her condition. It will teach her that her punishment has been to purify and not vindictively inflicted. It will be a text upon which her teachers will build 100 arguments until she learns that even in her dark condition, she has not been forsaken, though she knew it not. The hand of God was guiding her. Now, this is so important to all of us when he says, her punishment has been to purify and not vindictively inflicted. And I can't say it better myself. When we go, and everything we go through, or maybe not everything, but I'd say the vast majority, when we have these dramas, these trials and tribulations, people think, oh, I'm being persecuted, some people will have like an enemy, right, that will try to stop them and bring them down. But that enemy's there for a purpose. The enemy's there to take you to another level, to show you maybe what you've done to another person at a different time. Anything you think is a punishment is not. It's edification. It's set to teach you. And if you can begin to understand that, and then have a sense of humor about your life when things go wrong, like, oh no, what did I do now? Your life is so much stress-free. It becomes so much better, and you're actively, when these happens, instead of feeling bad and being washed over by primitive emotions, you're actively thinking about your character, what could have caused this, how you can improve your character and never do that which was done to you again. Then he said, thank you. I said, that's just Fred, the Spirit. As you expound them, I can understand how the tender mercies of God are over all his works. But now I have another difficulty I would like you to clear up. There are many children born who are morally incapable of discerning right from wrong. How is this regarded on their arrival here? And this is the answer. In all cases, justice and equity are meted out unerringly, he replied, and the penalty of all sin will fall upon the shoulders of the sinner. In an earthly court, a kleptomaniac or an idiot would be pitied for his misfortune, not punished, though he had broken a law. Is man more righteous than our God? That maimed body or unbalanced mind is a result of sin more frequently than accident, and someone must bear the punishment thereof. Who shall it be? Listen to this awful truth. Every man shall give an account of the deeds done in the body, and one of those deeds is the deadly wrong of propagating life without thought or reference to a healthy and competent body in which it can perform the functions requisite to its advancement, which leaves a child to bear the consequences of the sin of its father or mother in its own organism. This may transfer the infirmity, but cannot change the responsibility. The sins are borne by the child, but the errors committed in its incompetency are counted as the sins of that father still, as he will be called to answer for them at the bar of God. So, and that is, again, a part of Spiritism. For every action, there is a reaction. So if the parents, let's say the mother, and treat a child horribly, or don't give them spiritual upbringing at all, don't tell them right from wrong, or have a very dysfunctional family, or still is an addict of some sort, as pregnancies is going on, those parents will bear that responsibility. Now you say, well, what about the child? Child's innocent. Well, that child was selected to be a child of those parents because most probably in some form or another, and there's always exceptions, that child had been parents like them. So you can say, okay, well, how will this ever end? Because this child will then become a dysfunctional parent. Well, that's not always true, right? Some children can rise above that, and other children can't. And those who cannot will then have to pay the price. Now, that price, as we have, 7 billion people here on Earth, you're always going to have a certain percentage that will improve and a certain percentage that will not improve. As we begin to become a planet of regeneration, those who are not improving will be sent to another planet, so they'll be given another, who knows how many thousands of years to improve, in order to one day for them also to be on a planet of regeneration, and probably just won't be on the planet Earth, as the Earth is now becoming into the phase of a planet of regeneration, which is going to officially start in around 2052. and lasts for about 9,000 years. So that's where we're at. So again, this is slow. This isn't Jesus coming to you and putting his hands on you and say, "Oh, everything's forgiven. You're now a perfect person," and you become a perfect person. No, Jesus will put his hand on you and have you feel love and just an enormous amount of love and forgiven, and you'll want to never disappoint our Christ, but you still have to handle yourself, and that is you'll want to atone for your wrongs by yourself, and you want to improve. If you did wrong and then someone just forgave you, did you really learn the wrong? Did you learn never to do that again? No, you have to reform yourself from the inside at your own pace. And sometimes that pace is painfully slow, and sometimes we're given opportunity to learn from our trials and tribulations, but we don't. And therefore, you have to have more, and actually sometimes more dramatic trials and tribulations. It's all up to us. I wish I'd known this earlier. Okay, that is a terrible thought, I said as he concluded. It is nevertheless true, he replied. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Again, for a reaction, there's a reaction. I had been too much engrossed in the subject of our conversation to do more than mechanically notice the scenes through which we were passing. But at this point, my attention was arrested by a change that was taking place in the appearance of my companion, who was now surrounded by a soft and momentarily increasing halo, from which I became conscious of drawing the necessary power to accompanying him. Our course was along the brighter way, occupying the center and crown of the landscape. But his character had so changed since we commenced our journey that in its present transparency it looked like a path of sunbeams up which we sped our aerial flight, rather than a regular road, in a kingdom more substantial than Greece or Rome, because it held a more legitimate right to the designation eternal. Now, why is he becoming softer and brighter? And why is the landscape changing? Well, because that road is going through levels of the spirit world. And as his, I think Eusebius, I think that was his mentor's name, as they go up in higher levels. And now, of course, Fred is being helped because the high spirit is helping him. He doesn't probably recognize this yet, but he is kind of helping him change his paraspirit to adapt to this more energy and less material, versus the majority probably people that landed on that little grassy knoll in heaven, who are going to other places, maybe not as high, and therefore they're not as much energy. They're a little bit more matter. So they are actually probably transitioning in different levels of heaven. Since its creator Miller was God, the soft and fragrant atmosphere seemed to lift us in its embrace beyond the reach of weariness. The breezes redolent with life and rest kissed and wooed us with amorous caresses. The penetrating sunlight bathing the country pierced through and through until we shone with that glory, the like of which beamed from the face of Moses when he had been in the presence of God on Sinai. It was to me as a delightful dream, the real and unreal blended in perfect harmony, in which I found no room for even the suspicion of surprise. On more than one occasion, I remember reasoning with myself that it was more than like. It was surely a dream for which I should presently awake to face the stern realities of my disappointed life, with an additional pang added thereto by the recollection of its pleasant illusion. And I am still conscious of a shudder running through me at the thought of how I could sustain such a heavy blow as I needs must suffer. My companion noticed this and drew me somewhat closer to him, while he answered my thoughts in one of those semi-conscious reveries so characteristic of this life, in which have more of encouragement and suggestion in their tone than admonition. I was caught more of the spirit of what he said than the letter, and as the whole was an impromptu, I could not ask him to repeat it to me, so that I am sensible of the injustice I do in attempting to reproduce the lines which made such an impression upon me at the time. The following will give a crude idea of what he said. And of course, the spirit, and this is, you hear this even in near death experiences, much less spiritist literature. People don't point fingers and say, "Oh, that was stupid," or "That was bad." They will, and they won't, they won't admonish you. They will encourage you. They'll point out in a friendly tone, "Yeah, this could have been better. Think about this next." They will be encouraging, and they won't be discouraging. And they'll let you learn at your pace. They don't expect perfection. They want perfection. Jesus Christ wants us to be perfect, and that's what we're trying to achieve. But they know that we are trying to attain it, and we are trying to attain it with our best attitude that we can do. And his spirit probably brought him closer, not just to talk to him because he could do that from great length, but probably also to protect him with his energy as they were going up into the higher levels of heaven. Okay, this is what he said. All dreams are as real as the waking. Then why should we spurn the delights? The soul climbs permissible heights. When sleep bids the heart pause its aching and gazes with eyes which are bright and strong on the promised home it will reach ere long. The soul is the man and eternal. The body but lives for a day. 'Tis of earth and must needs pass away, but the soul is visions diurnal. From the mountains of sleep look over the river, and hell's the beloved in the land of forever. And this is so true. This is what we hear over and over again in the spirit world, is that our time on earth just like flashes by in a minute. So when we are here in a day, a week, a month, a year, it just seems like eternity. But when we get back in the spirit world, it's like, oh, that was over fast. I'll carry on. The child and the man and the maiden have dreamed and will dream evermore. 'Tis the solace for all men, hearts sore, and true rest for the soul heavy laden, till in that last sleep the body forsaking. The soul enters heaven, that dream without waking. I had neither the opportunity nor disposition to reply, for with the end of his rhapsody we paused, turned, and the scene which lay before me caused me to break away from the train of thought which had called forth such a pregnant lesson, while I was carried captive by the indescribable glories of the panorama towards which he waved his hand. So now he's going to describe at the level he is at. And this is heaven, right? This is what he's going to describe is what we are working towards. And when I say working towards, I'm saying that we are modifying our character and personality. We are rewiring our brains in order to take away the primitive emotions, hate, envy, jealousy, pride, and replace it with love, fraternity, charity, and honesty. Let me go through his description. As we stood upon the hillside from which we started, the one noticeable feature in the landscape, as I have said, was the radiation of the many colored roads leading to the numerous cities now visible, but which then were hidden from our view. At our feet, running from the right and left, was one of the darkest hue, crimson black, having its termination round or underneath the hill, and down which I'd watched that unfortunate and terrified woman pass from sight. This gloomy and foreboding pass formed the basis or foundation of the scene, the next in each succeeding road assuming a lighter tint and almost imperceptible graduations, until the ray of purity up which we had traveled formed a climax to the whole and capped the double prism as a crown. As I recalled that view in the light of the many explanations I had since received, I thought that the arrangement was a grand prophetic symbol of this happier life, showing that the natural and uninterrupted progress which the soul was enabled to make from the far extremity of sin to rest in perfect happiness in the time to come, and my heart was glad. Another thought reoccurred to me at this time. The question that I had put to my guide respecting that pang the former view was calculated to cause in the breast of those more unfortunate persons I had met with, and I realized the unspeakable mercy and love that had been exercised in the design displayed before me. The former prospect was but the reverse of the picture, which now I had rounded to gaze upon such glories, whereof I had not seen neither could it nor enter into the heart of man to conceive. If that sight would serve to add a pang to any soul as it rose again before the memory, I could well understand how this would overwhelm it with despair. Truly, the mercy of God is over all his works. Far, far away upon the western horizon, softened and warmed by the wide expanse which lay between us, hung the mists across the boundaries of the country. Their appearance was not black and chill as when I last looked upon, but a soft crimson hue suffusing them, and made them look like the rich tapestries the sun draws across the windows of the sky. When the autumn day is closing, and the weary laborer hies him homeward before the tempest, which he hears rumbling in the distance, overtakes him. Behind us, at an altitude my vision could not estimate or measure over the mountain peaks, stream rays of glory, bathing and nourishing all that land. It was as though, while one invisible sun was setting in the distant west, from out the eastern dawn, another, the sun of righteousness, it might be, was rising from the bosom of the sea of love. Between this dawning and that sunset, what a multitude of weary souls were enjoying that rest upon which, like myself, so many had but recently entered. So we have to remember that as a spirit, already is being gifted these certain powers, which he didn't quite recognize, but he could see. And the higher the spirit, the farther they can see in that land, in the world, the spirit realm. Also, in the lower levels of heaven, the days and nights are coordinated with the days and nights of earth, because these people are still somewhat connected to the material plane of earth. They connected to earth, either a family, a city, something like that. Not completely connected, because they're full of love and they were able to make it to heaven, but they still concern themselves with a lot of earthly projects. But as you go higher and higher, you lose that connection with day and night. So it's always day and it's always a good temperature. I'll carry on. For the purpose of our view, we were standing upon the slope of some majestic mountain chain, the height of which defied my powers of computation. If I sought its peak, my eyes were blinded by the arc of light which beamed upon me and frustrated my quest. While far away, until my vision grew uncertain in the distance, I could see the range extend like the natural bounding line of the two adjacent nations. The path which served as a vantage ground for observation was like the even crest of a smaller range running from the base toward the brow of the glory crowned and immeasurable hill behind me. In the distance lay a plain of apparently illimitable proportions, undulating and picturesque beyond description, in which hill and dale, lake and stream, terrace and plateau, park and pasture, grove and garden, city and homestead, palace and mansion were so arranged and disposed as to contribute their own peculiar feature to the grandeur of the whole. Throughout that vast domain, each shrub and flower, each house and hill, each stream and lake had its legitimate balance and maintained in a general harmony, and wonderfully beauty was the effect produced in the accomplishment of the design. So think about what he said. He's saying this idealized, let's say, valley of vegetation, roads, lakes, mansions, palaces, gardens, rivers, streams. It's all just beautiful, and it's all just wonderful. And we have a question here. It is like a veil. Is it like a veil being lifted? And it is kind of like a veil being lifted. And it maybe a better way of saying is that he's being ushered into this higher level. Now, look, the law of affinity tells each one of us where we belong after we pass over. Now, this spirit, Fred, was a very wonderful person. He helped a lot of people in the slums of London, and he was being taken to a higher plane, and therefore he was being gifted. And this is where you could say the veil was being lifted. His spirit brought him. His spirit was supplying him power, so he could interpret and he could actually see the scenery. Now, if he had been that lower spirit that had to take the low road and was at that level, they would see they'd be blind. They'd see nothing but white, and they would feel terrible. So it's more if instead of a veil being lifted, it's you're being seated the power to see what's there, and you're being brought to a higher level of energy versus matter. And that is one of the wonderful things of the spirit world, because as you go higher and higher in heaven, in different levels of heaven, you don't just have like, okay, yeah, you graduated to level 2 or whatever it is. No, you're given more attributes, you're given more power, you're given more responsibility. You can look at it as if you're a mobile phone and you're having more memory and more apps and more, so therefore you have the ability not just to call or text someone, you also have the ability to tie into the universal database, find where that person is, make an appointment with that person, look at their past, future. I mean, it just, there's so much more that you do as you go higher and higher. So you are actually being enlarged and and empowered. And why are you empowered and enlarged? Because you have deserved it. You have demonstrated by your actions on earth that you're responsible and you're loving and that you can handle power. And if given power, you won't use it to, think of a bat and hit people on the head. That's why we're on earth, right? We're not on earth just to be punished, right? No, we're on earth to be educated and to know that to illustrate power, it must be done very wisely and benevolently. Okay, let me carry on. In the hours of weariness and discolation in the old life, I tried to frame an outline ideal of what heaven must be. Who had not? My highest conception had been a background of disappointment and irritation. It was like a fascinating painting of some glorious sunset, entrancing with its beauty as you first beheld it. But as you gaze upon it, its strange, weird, half visionary phantoms rise from out the canvas and cast their gloomy shadows like corpse mantles over the genius which had first so charmed us. And let me show this. And this is what it says. Like, it's like upgrading your phone. Exactly. It is like upgrading your phone as you go up. You've got more. And with more, just as Jesus said, those who are given more will be expected to do more. With knowledge and power comes greater and greater responsibility and more satisfaction, because you can help more people. Those things become much just wonderful. Okay. Everything upon the canvas is stiff and cold. So he's looking at this like, what had he imagined? Lifeless. The drama had been caused to stop as the artist caught some situation most congenial, and of its poetry no more will ever reach the ear of man than the irritating monotone on the lip when the command to stand was given. How can we know the sunset from such an inadequate presentment? The pygmy momentary conception may be faithful, yea, perfect in its color and situation at the instant it was caught, but it needs the quick succession of the changing tints, the rolling and curving of the clouds, the rapid entrances and exits of the dying hero. Day, accompanied by the soft sobbing and sighing of the breezes. It demands the presence indicated and the increasing power portrayed, as step by step the somber night achieves his dark advantage, until at length he drowns the sun in the lifeblood of his victim. And the black curtain falls over the tragic scene as twilight, no longer able to sustain the unequal conflict, closes her eye in death. All this and more we need before the artist can depict his sunset faithfully upon the canvas. And so of heaven, we still need further countless complications and impossibilities before we can conceive a faint idea of that which awaits us. My previous conceptions fell thus short of the reality of the scene which lay before me as I stood upon that mountain side. Yet this was not heaven itself, but only one of the first halting places within the ranch of God's infinitude, where homeward bound souls could rest and refresh themselves in their migration from the earth toward their Father's house of many mansions. I would pause here, nor further attempt the impossible, were it not for my yearning for the welfare of my brethren, who are still behind me and cherish the many errors of the flesh in their ignorance of the life upon which I have entered. The consciousness of the inadequate powers I possess to convey a knowledge of the truth I have found almost forbids me to proceed, but I will be content if only I can in some measure make it known that this existence is not a vague and vapory state with nothing more substantial than a cloud in which to lay the foundations of our habitations. To us, now this is important, it is as real and tangible as the earth is to you. And therefore, when I use the designations of beauty and grandeur, which are familiar to the earth, it is not that I would indicate this life to be as crude and gross as that which lies behind me, but rather the means are not available for me to convey a just conception of its realities any more than the artist has the power to reproduce the sunset in all its sublimity and entirety. So, and you read this a lot in spiritist literature, where they say, "I don't really have the, I don't really have the vocabulary in your language to describe what I saw." First of all, the sounds are beyond our hearing, and the colors are beyond our ability to view. Now we'll get through it. Now this is the next part's interesting too. This is when he's finally acknowledging that there's something happening to himself. I'll start in those first few moments of contemplation. I became conscious of an enormous, increase in my powers of sight. For as language fails me to express the quality of the scene unfolded to my view, so also am I powerless to convey an indication of the area over that celestial panorama was unrolled. Yet from the foreground to the faraway horizon, I could plainly see in the hazeless atmosphere of eternity, not only the effects in aggregate, but its component parts of each feature, which in turn arrested my attention. Did I say it had plains and streams? It were far more true to say my eyes wandered over vast continents, fruitful and picturesque, each bounded by proportional seas and oceans from the poetic billows of which the sting of all destruction had been torn away. Mansion and palace gleamed resplendent in the shadowless sunlight, not cramped or circumscribed in detail or design to suit the exigency of space or limit, not robbed of grace or beauty by the use of coarse material, having the power to resist the storm and tempest as effectively as can blast the architectural dream. What need of such restrictions in the domain of the infinite? That kingdom where they refuse to traffic in the merchandise of tempest or decay. So, again, what spirits say is that you can see now. You can see very, very far, and also when you want to focus in on some detail that could be, to us, could be hundreds of kilometers away. You can focus on that, and you can see very well. But as it goes on far, far into your vision, it kind of this more fades out because there's probably another state or phase or level of the spirit realm that's at that next level that you cannot see. And also, there's infinite space. There's you don't have to create your mansion or your house or whatever you want to build right next to the other person's house because property here, right, as you say in real estate, property is forever, and that's not true in the spirit world. You can expand the property. In fact, there was this whole city that was going to go up in a level, and they brought the people into the city into this kind of convention hall. It didn't have windows per se, and they said, "Look, you've done very well. We're going to actually raise this entire city up a level because you've all raised yourself up a level, but we're going to expand it." And so the city was, kind of compact, and then they said, and then as